Hello, I'm Adam,
And I'm Adrian.
and welcome to Cast from the Crypt. Today we get to evolve our understanding of X and of Ty West and of Mia Goth and of these characters they've created because we watched Pearl. There's a lot to talk about, I guess. First of all, in comparison to X, did you like it more? Did you like it less?
I liked it more.
I think I liked it more as well. For
Yeah.
me, the reason I think I liked it more is it's more unique, I think. I don't know if you could even call this movie a slasher. There's like some slashing in it. X was more of a traditional slasher, but this is more of a character study, you know? The
Yeah.
protagonist is the villain, is the monster. And
And
it's
yet, I sympathized with her character at in various instances, and that's why I enjoyed the movie more. I think it actually. Don't get me wrong. Not everything she does is something that you can understand, but and we'll get into that. But for me, this felt like a Mia Goth showcase. Like after X, Ty West was like, "I got something good here."
Well, it is noteworthy to say that one of the executive producers was Mia Goth. Kid
Right.
Cudi was too, and she also, in tandem with Ty West, worked on the screenplay. So this character of Pearl has kind of evolved with this duo kind of working together, and I really appreciate the character study that the X franchise, I'll call it, has become. I'm really excited about Max 66 scene that's coming out. I think later this year.
Me too. Yeah, yeah, I think so. I'm also excited about it, and what's really kind of interesting about these movies is, after X, when I heard that Pearl was going to be released, I guess I knew the direction it could have gone in, but Pearl doesn't strike me, or at least in X, didn't strike me as somebody that had, this might just be me, I don't know, but an excessively long history of being a villain. I don't know why, but the way that they present her in that movie, it made me feel that in her old age, she had become dissatisfied with her lifestyle and the changing of her body, et cetera, et cetera. And so when thinking about a prequel that took place when she was so young, I really didn't know what direction it was going to go into. I mean, I figured it would be a slasher, but I wasn't really sure how the premise would play out. Like you said, I found this movie to be kind of original, unique, surprising, and that's what really excited me about it. Midway through the film, I was like, "Nah, this is not what I expected," and I'm happy about that because I think they could have tried to do something way more derivative here, more slasher-esque, and have probably been just as successful, but it didn't feel like they did. Does that make sense?
Yeah, no, yeah, I agree. Like, thinking about this, I knew this movie was about the character Pearl. It's called Pearl. And I was thinking, like, okay, well, what could the threat be? What could, be the monster? What could be the conflict in this movie if the monster from the last movie is the main character?
Right.
And watching this movie, we find out that it's all kind of internal. It's all coming from this same character. In, like you said, a Mia Goth showcase. Like, hats
Yeah.
off to her.
Yeah, I
She's
thought she
doing
did
so.
really good in this movie.
Yeah, she's very impressive. Very impressive. So many times in this movie.
Did you know anything about Mia Goth before
I didn't know a thing. I
watching
didn't
these movies?
never saw anything she was in, never heard of her before, and I've seen these movies now and I'm pretty impressed.
Yeah, me too. I've become a little bit of a fan. I looked into her, and she got her film debut in that movie Nymphomaniac, which when it came out, I was maybe, I don't know, eighth grade, seventh grade, and I remember, I remember some of my friends being like, "Dude, there's this movie. I don't know if it was on Netflix. It was streaming on something." And they were like, "It's crazy. Because it's a erotic art movie." And I never watched it, but that's where she got her start.
How old is she?
29.
She's 29.
Yeah,
All
yeah.
right.
And something else I found out, she has a child with Shia LaBeouf.
Oh, wow. Wow. What a busy woman. I thought she was 22. So
Oh no, yeah,
I'm
she's a
impressed. Wow.
little older than that. Still very young. She's also in Suspiria, the remake, the 2018 one
Oh,
that
is
did.
she? That's I've seen the original. I haven't seen the remake. I've been meaning to.
Nor have I, but yeah, she is busy. She's doing a lot of work, and I'm glad, and I hope to see her in more outside of this franchise because this is all I'm familiar with.
Yeah. Okay. Well, for a movie like this, in this particular case, we cannot accurately talk about everything we liked and everything I noticed and appreciated without getting into the plot fairly well. So, you want to jump right into that?
Yeah, yeah. Uh,
Okay. Well, it opens with this panning shot of the property we see in X. I think we called it the Texas Chainsaw House because that's what it looked
yeah,
like. Except
yeah.
now it's got this fresh coat of paint. The barn is beautiful. It's a sunny day. The field is verdant, green, and we get the credits in this beautiful scrawling cursive text. The year is 1918, and we see Pearl. She has ribbons in her hair, wearing these cute overalls, pigtails. There's this very peaceful music. It's youthful, like truly in a word. That's what this scene is. It's Pearl in her former glory. Or at least that's how it presents itself in this first scene. And I really like this. And it made me understand maybe how it was easy to go straight from filming X to filming Pearl. Like, all right, you're there, you're out, you're at the set, you're with the actress. Might as well keep going while that creativity train is at full steam, right?
Yeah, I really like the open because it is so beautiful. And really, this movie is so well shot. I was really impressed with the cinematography and the camera work here. What I also like about this is that idyllic or, supposed idyllic farmhouse homesteading, um, the depiction of that type of life in the opening is abruptly cut off, right? You're reminded of the setting fairly early on. Were you expecting it to be set during the 1918 flu pandemic?
No, but then again, I don't know much about the 1918 flu pandemic.
Well, I of course heard mostly about the that pandemic during the 2020
Of
pandemic
course.
because people were drawing so many parallels between the coronavirus pandemic and the 1918 flu pandemic. Um, and I don't know, I kind of thought it was clever to use it as a backdrop because, of course, that was going on during World War One. Um,
Got a bit
what I also
overshadowed,
thought was
right?
interesting, yeah, yeah. And what I also thought was kind of interesting is that Pearl in this movie, they establish it within the first 20 minutes of the film. She is actually married to Howard. We don't see that relationship form. We don't. They just show us that she is married. I think through a letter, right?
Yes, and then throughout the movie.
Right, right, of course. But again, that kind of speaks to. I had no idea where they were going to go with this origin story. Um, but we meet Pearl well into early adulthood, well into a relationship with her husband who is currently serving in World War One. We do hear in X that Howard is a veteran, and now we get to see exactly what war he served in. But I love the juxtaposition between that idyllic home life, that opening shot, and then boom, we're hit with a really bleak era in our country's history.
Yeah, yeah, and 1918 is a very alienated time from us now. It's a weird setting. You didn't think you'd be able to relate to Pearl, as you know, especially in X. She's this ancient woman who's murderous, and in this movie, you understand her and sympathize her. And some of the ways I think they do that subtly, is that you can sympathize with her social situation because they do kind of highlight and emphasize the significance of this pandemic. When she goes out into the town, she has to wear a mask. She really is admonished against doing anything social by her mother, with the fear that she might bring home disease and kill off her ailing father. So she's isolated because of mass illness, and she's stuck with this family she normally wouldn't want to be with, and that is kind of driving her crazy. And she's stuck with her father, who is basically a vegetable. He cannot move anything. And her mother have to take care of him. And this is what's kind of pushing her over the edge. This is what's grating on her mind. And so right off the bat, you can kind of relate to this situation. And I think everyone in the world can now, everybody watching this movie. So already, Pearl is more sympathetic than we initially thought she could be.
Right. Not to mention, you spoke to her family driving her up a wall, but specifically her mother, Ruth. I'm not familiar with the actress that plays Ruth. Her name is Tandy Wright. And I feel like I've heard her name before, but nonetheless, I thought she was really effective in this role. They are a German family, an early example of Texas Germans. And or I guess actually a later example of Texas Germans, if it's 1918, but nonetheless, very, very strict, old-fashioned household. And yeah, like you said, really, really sympathetic character right from the open, and you can understand why she longs for something different. And there's this theme in the movie of Pearl being captivated by film and stars, specifically women that perform, and it makes so much sense. And I love the thread that you can follow to X. I think it's like expertly done, really. And again, this is all well within the first 45 minutes of the movie. We are explained this. They get you right into it.
Yeah, definitely. Her mother is this austere German woman, like you said. And I feel like that, I don't know, it feels a little more set in the location. I really do believe that this is Houston area, small town Texas. But yeah, I guess the beginning of like us seeing her idyllic life shattered and the bitter cold of reality set in is this opening scene where she's dancing, they're playing this music, it's very beautiful, and then her mother shows up and tells her to stop and get to work. And that kind of sums up their relationship and sums up what the rest of this movie is going to be like. Her overbearing mother and her, more or less, she's seeing him as a burden of a father. And of course, she's going to want to escape. Pretty early on, she has to go into town to get some medicine. And she sneaks away to go live her cute fantasy life. She goes to see a moving picture of these ladies dancing, and that is when you see these stars in her eyes sparkle, because she knows what she wants to do. She wants to be loved, she wants to be beautiful, and she doesn't explicitly say this, but she mirrors something Maxine says in X. Maxine in X says that she wants to live the life she deserves. That's a refrain. And Pearl says, I think at one point, that she deserves to be a star because life has been so terrible that she's deserved to have greatness and to be loved by people, by millions of people. She feels like life can't be this cruel without some sort of cosmic karma reward that she's owed. We don't really see her do any crazy dancing. She's just, kind of frolicking through a farm, but we don't really see her doing any intensive dancing. It's more like she wants to be loved wants to be famous than she wants to actually be this great dancer.
Right.
And some of the characters throughout the movie kind of feed this delusion. One of these characters, probably the biggest character that does this, we meet right after this scene. His name is David, and he is the projectionist at the theater. She goes behind the theater in this little alley, and he steps out for a cigarette, and that's when they meet, and there's this immediate sort of romantic connection they have. Very obvious. I think this scene, they only exchange a few words, but some of those words is, hey, next time you're around here, come back and I'll show you a movie for free because I'm the projectionist. And there's this flirtation, despite the fact that there's a really short scene. And so now we have this internal conflict. She wants to be famous. She wants to travel the world. She wants to live her life, but she's shackled to her family, to this farm, to her husband who's not even there. You know, she's somehow both single and unavailable. Like, she's truly the most repressed woman that could be. And it's not even necessarily because of other people. And it is kind of just because of the times and her situation.
Yeah, and it made me wonder how many people probably felt so isolated in similar ways during this era or during other times of hardship like World War I, World War II, Great Depression. It made my mind really wander. And again, really made me want to rewatch X with this background information taken into account. As she's on her way out of town, she's riding her bike back home. There is a cornfield where she stops and sees a scarecrow, and she walks up to the scarecrow, she walks up to the scarecrow, sort of examining it at first, climbs up the rod that it's on. It's got these places for her to step up, and she removes the scarecrow from its pole and starts to dance with it. And you immediately understand she's fantasizing about the projectionist. Maybe her mind is wandering with fame and fortune, not even just money, but like good fortune, right? Being able to dance with somebody, be close to somebody after she just had this meet cute with this handsome man. And then we get not our first glimpse at Pearl's psyche, but an early example that stuff is there's a little more to her than you might think. Do you want to discuss that scene? I'll give you the honors.
Well, as she's dancing with this scarecrow, she imagines the face of the scarecrow is actually this projectionist, and she drops it suddenly and screams out, "I'm married," and you see all the crows fly out of the field. There's this shot of her in the cornfield, like from way far away. She's itty bitty, and all these crows fly out, and she's the only living thing there. But then I guess in her fantasy, her temptation gets the best of her, and she has sex with a scarecrow.
And boy, it really goes on for a while. It's like, I don't know how long the scene is, but for me it felt like 3 minutes.
I didn't think it was that long.
It was not
3 minutes.
No. I know it wasn't, but it felt like it to me, which is just too long to watch somebody hump a scarecrow. But whatever. I kept thinking about, there's no way, like, what are those bugs called that hide in like hay and dried grass?
Chiggers.
That are native to this area? Yes, those. I kept thinking, oh boy, could you imagine?
Yeah, I would. You'd have been eaten alive.
Yeah, I'm good.
I've been eaten alive like that before.
After Pearl has a good time with the scarecrow, she makes her way back home, and her mother totally knows that she's been up to no good. Though she's just been watching a movie and getting off in a cornfield, her mother reacts like it's the worst thing she could have done, because Pearl did take an extra, I think it's 8 cents in the movie.
Yes.
That was meant to be used for groceries, and used it instead on watching a moving picture. And so she's left to go upstairs and do so without supper, which is such a classic punishment
Yeah, she lies and says that she spent it on candy, but her mother, austere as she may be, is somewhat making sense, I think, throughout the movie, somewhat logical.
Yeah.
You know, she's brutal, she's repressive, but she's not like full on abusive. At least not at
Right.
first. And so it does kind of feel like this repression and isolation Pearl feels isn't just because there's people in her lives holding her down. It's because the times are so tough and her situation is just really bad. And then her mother later in the movie says that sometimes life isn't about what you want, it's about making do with what you have, with your situation. And I guess for Pearl, her situation just was so terrible that she didn't want to try that, didn't want to make believe that's what she had to do. And so she's living in these fantasies because it's her escapism. It's in her mind the only way she's gonna not be trapped and stuck with this life she didn't ask for and did not imagine herself ever living.
Another character that we meet along the way that feeds Pearl's delusions of grandeur is her sister-in-law, Mitzi, who is, again, portrayed by an actress I've never seen in my life. In fact, I couldn't find much about her at all, but I thought she was quite good in this too. Emma Perot is her name, or excuse me, Emma Jenkins Perot. But Mitzi, you can tell, is clearly more affluent. She is, it doesn't strike me at least as a farm girl. She's very well put together, blonde, blue eyes. And so I think Pearl really trusts her. And Mitzi tells her of this audition that is being held locally to get new dancers, chorus girls, for a traveling troupe. And Pearl, of course, her mind runs wild with this. This is a shot for her, a way to get out of, again, these miserable circumstances that she finds herself in, to no fault of her own. And in a way, we see this more clearly later on, but I think this information coming from Mitzi strikes her as, wow, somebody like Mitzi, so well put together, so pretty, thinks that I'm capable of this, right? And Mitzi is fairly supportive throughout the movie, even towards the end. But she does, unfortunately, feed this delusion that Pearl has that ultimately drives her insane in the end.
Yeah. Yeah, and when we first see Mitzi too, she's wearing this like blue gown. She's more of a Southern belle than she is a farm girl. And I think it is a lot more subtextual than anything else in the movie, but there is this sort of like, maybe not jealousy, but envy. This envy Pearl has of her and her seemingly better life. And later in the movie, she does mention that part of the reason she married Howard is because he was a farmhand on their property, but he clearly came from a nicer place, a better family, and a better life, a better situation. And she saw Howard as yet another ticket out of her situation. She's at least going to have this better family to fall back on if anything happens. And then Howard disappears, and everything stays exactly like it was, and she's just as unhappy. Fate is still not kind. So the projectionist story, I guess their relationship advances pretty quickly, and this speaks to how desperate Pearl is, I think. But she goes back into town. She sneaks out of the house at night, actually, to visit the projectionist David. She sees a movie with him, and he shows her this movie that's not one you'd see at the cinema. It's a special film that you can only find in the back rooms, I guess, and it ends up being this kind of sexual pornographic film that he says he got in France. It's very risque, and then immediately afterwards they have sex and they're lovers now. You knew this was coming, and it happens pretty quick. I'm kind of glad they didn't drag that out, because they could have, but we knew how it was gonna end up anyways.
Yeah, I agree. My understanding is those are called stag films,
Oh,
and apparently the one that he shows her is a real one, a fairly well-known one from like the silent film era. And I didn't know this, but uh, pornography was illegal back then
yeah.
in the States. They allude to that in the movie, or I guess they say it outright. He talks about how he could get into a lot of trouble for having this movie and for showing it to her. Um, but she is, I think she's excited by the film clearly because their affair takes place right after that. There is that notable moment in the scene, and I really enjoyed it. The part where I think they had just had sex, and she's talking about how she wants to get out of this life. She wants to be able to go and explore because he keeps talking about Europe. Um, and sometimes she just wishes, I think the quote was that my family would just die. And the projectionist is, I mean, he goes wide eyed at that comment. And it again speaks to her mental state, but he does not abandon ship. And that does prove to be a fatal choice, unfortunately.
Yeah, there's these increasing moments of apathy that she has as the movie goes on. This is like one of the first little comments she makes, but she keeps saying stuff like that as the movie goes on, and then her uh, apathy to what she's doing becomes extreme to the point that she, but we'll get into that. Um, so here, David just encourages her, oh, yeah, you should be a dancer if that's what you want to do. You're only young once, so live your life before it's over. Uh, which is fairly harmless. That's a pretty easy thing to say to someone, but in the practical situation of someone's life, that's a lot harder to apply. And that's a lot. And it's something Pearl internalizes so much more than he clearly intended to
Right.
mean. She thinks that she is destined to be a star now. She will join a troupe and be a dancer, and she will get out of there. Like, this will happen. This is destiny. And he will take her to Europe because he offhandedly mentioned it. And who is this guy? Besides someone she met for maybe 5 minutes once and then again and hooked up with, to him, he's nothing to her. She's not much to him either. But to her, this is like, once again, like one of he's her ticket out. This is how she escapes her life. Thus sown are the seeds of the downfall. Please. After you.
Well, their romance is kind of sweet. It struck me as really kind of likable, and I agree with you. I'm glad it wasn't like very long-winded because the guy is a little half-baked and not incredibly well developed. He's exactly that. He is a ticket out of this place. Yet, I found myself kind of like wishing she could have this, and that's a compliment to the film. Of course, what she's doing is kind of awful because her husband is in World War one of the most brutal wars ever fought. And so I just thought that was really, really well done to be able to make me feel for her and kind of want this for her. What we didn't discuss was just before this scene, just before she goes and runs off to have sex with this mysterious projectionist, she kills her mother and father.
Well, I think we're conflating two scenes, actually. I think she watches the film and then has sex later.
Is that what happens?
I think so.
Oh, you're probably right. Well, she also kills her mother and father. But she does kill her father when the projectionist takes her home. So you're right. I think I am conflating two scenes.
Yes.
Things come to a head at home when Ruth finds I guess it would be like the equivalent to like a theater program, a playbill.
Yeah, it was like a playbill for the movie, which I guess they used to give out.
Cool. Bring them back. But Pearl and Ruth get into a very, very intense argument. They get into a physical altercation when Ruth strikes Pearl, and we see her snap. Pearl. She pushes her mom into a fireplace, and her mother's dress catches on fire. I mean, I don't think anybody would ever erupt into flames the way that she does, but she suffers these awful, awful, awful burns. She clearly can't move. And so Pearl, while she's still alive, throws her mother into the basement, which, as you pointed out in X, they probably wouldn't have. uh, but she throws her downstairs, I think hoping that she'll die.
Yeah.
We learn, unfortunately, later it's not such a quick death.
Yeah. Well, it doesn't feel like she's intentionally killed her mother. It's her mother slaps her. She yells, "I hate you," at her mother. Her mother slaps her. Then she slaps her mother, and they kind of fight. They're struggling, and then just in the struggle, she catches on fire. And as she's burning on the floor, to put the fire out, Pearl grabs the pot of corn they're boiling. So it's boiling water, and then she dumps it on her mother to put the fire out, which I'm sure just scalds her worse. And then she just kind of puts her in the basement and forgets about her, I guess, to forget about her. And here, this murder is a little more crime of passion, a little more understandable, a little more of accidental. But she devolves from here. She has no idea what to do. Her father is making noises of horror, groans of horror, as much expression as he can muster. But she just runs away from this horror and ends up at who else but David's theater. And he's gonna take her in the back and they're gonna shag. And this is when they shag for the first time.
There you go. They have their magical evening together. He has no idea that her mom is beef jerky in the basement. And so he decides to take her back to the farm after their night together because it's the day of the audition. And this is a fun scene because he runs into like several red flags. Earlier on in the film, when Mitzi is introduced, she leaves a like roast pig for.
And it looked good, didn't it?
It did. She leaves a roast pig on the doorstep for Pearl and her family, or I guess rather for Ruth and her family, and nobody takes it inside. And of course, what happens when you don't take meat inside and it's outside for several days? Well, it becomes infested with maggots. And that level of negligence is, first of all, maggots are just an unsettling sight, but that level of negligence is indicative of a larger problem, right? If somebody can just leave a rotting hunk of meat on their doorstep for several days, there's something going on. And that is one of the first things that the projectionist is greeted by as he walks into Pearl's home. For me, that already would be a sign. Like, I'd already have one foot turning the opposite direction. But then Pearl and him start to chat, and as they chat, he hears, what is it, like one or two inconsistencies in her stories, in her remarks. She's also just increasingly more irritable and very domineering and protective of this relationship that you really can't even call a relationship. And this, of course, causes him to leave. I don't know if you want to discuss any of those moments more specifically.
Yeah, I guess so. Well, once again, this guy is like the guy she's hooking up with. They're not in a relationship. This is an affair. And it is horrible. Her husband's in World War I, you know, in the trenches, writing letters to her every day because she's the thing that keeps him going. And she's off committing adultery, but also this is realistic. You know, this is her situation. She's virtually single. She's probably been without Howard longer than they've been together. You know, it makes sense that she would have sex with strange men, especially if she thinks they care about her like she thinks this guy does. But, you know, this guy's just there to shag. And when they get to the house, she introduces her father to him, and he's a vegetable. And he says, "Nice to meet you, sir." And then I think the next scene is they go to her room and shag again. And then they end up in the this barn where they're having this conversation where he realizes she's unhinged. And he, after a few red flags, just goes, "Okay, well, I better get back to work. I'll see you later." And this upsets her. And this is when she, like, starts pressuring him, like, "No, what do you mean by that? Why do you seem so cold suddenly?" oh, I think you're
Yeah.
lying to me. I don't think you are going to take me to Europe. I think you're not really going to be the man who's going to be whisking me away into my dreams. And of course he's not. You know, he's just some dude. You keep calling him the projectionist. The character's name is David, but I don't even know if we learned that. Like, I don't. How often do they say? I think maybe once he says his name. You know.
Yeah, he introduces himself. I don't remember what the name was. I know the actor's name is also David.
Oh well, there you go.
So it's very possible they just were like, "Hey, let's use this guy's real name." And on IMDb, I found also the projectionist.
Oh well, there you go. Because he truly is like a no-name guy in her life, and she's seeing him as way more than that.
Exactly. And this whole scene is fantastic. This whole sequence, because, and I mean fantastic specifically because of Mia Goth's performance. Her running to her room and like patting the bed and bringing him back home and introducing him to her dad. It's all so, it's like she's a teen, you know? Her eagerness, her eyes wide with excitement and desire. It's like she is living this like teenage fantasy that she never could. And it's maybe, I don't know whether it's because of society or the pandemic or the war, or she was married so young. It doesn't quite matter. It could be all of those things combined, but Mia Goth her performance really makes you feel like this character has just been wanting for so long. And that's why she's driven into a fit of rage when he decides to leave, because she realizes that she must have said something, she must have done something to scare him. Of course, his body language is kind of giving it away too. But her shift from that, again, wide-eyed with excitement to, God, hostile and really kind of terrifying, I found really impressive.
Oh, yeah. Yeah.
I really, really enjoyed her performance in this sequence.
This is where we see her, like, truly the rage she's repressing comes out in one horrible moment. He goes and gets in his jalopy and is starting it up, and she picks up the pitchfork, which, you know, if Jason Voorhees has a machete, I think we can officially say Pearl has a pitchfork. Because I like to imagine this is the very same pitchfork we see in X. She kills a man with. And as he's starting up that car, you can see her making her way towards him. And she just plunges it into his chest. And he's spitting up blood, and it's gory, and it's violent. He's kind of just not driving, but more like falling on the steering wheel, and it's lazily kind of drifting away, and he doesn't get very far. And now she's got to get rid of the body, and this is when we see her make use of the alligator from X. And he's still big, and how old is this alligator?
That's right? What I'm wondering. I looked up how long gators live.
Like 60
Not
years,
this
right?
long. Yeah,
that's another problem. He could be alive. It could be the same gator, but that alligator in 1918 would have been like a foot long.
Right.
And like 20 pounds. It wouldn't be huge.
They do show gator eggs, right?
Yeah, so maybe it's like the mother of the alligator she has an eggs. Or, you know, I don't know, but she's using this alligator as a method of disposing bodies all the way back here. And this is probably the first... I guess this is the first body she does, the first human body anyway, she does this with. We see her do it with ducks she kills earlier, but...
Right, and the first car.
And the first car, exactly like she does in X, yeah. And you're left to wonder how many cars are in this pond.
The sequence is wrapped up by Pearl going back to the house, cleaning herself up, and putting on one of her mother's nicer dresses. And then she proceeds to dress up her dad as well, and has like one final moment with him and smothers him. I think she probably thinks, well, A, she can't keep him alive after what she's done, but B, there is no life for him anymore. She needs to go. She can't take care of him. It's not like he can take care of herself. So she just ends it. Her interaction with him, though one-sided, because she's the only one that can communicate, made me feel that she does love her dad, and so they're still trying to kind of build that sympathetic character, but at the same time, it's pretty brutal. Uh,
Yeah. Well,
Watching
she's
her smother this man to death.
kind of respected him by putting on this nice clothes. She's dressed him
Hmm.
up before she kills him. Like, she does have a little bit more love and respect for him than she does for these other people she's killed. It's not a rageful murder. It's like a, I can't do this anymore. You go to bed. But I do love this scene. While her dad is a vegetable, he really does his best to draw this look of horror that is very subtle but really like accurate, really well done, and it conveys the emotion
Yeah.
really well. And I it's a
The only
small
thing
thing to
that
appreciate, but wow.
no, yeah, I agree though. The only thing that kind of rubbed me the wrong way is the whole movie. He's like kind of in the same position, his head slightly to the side. He can't move. But then when she starts to smother him, uh, he doesn't struggle an insane amount, but he's moving far more than he could like the entire movie. Uh, and I think he makes noise too, right?
Yeah, well, it pans away and
Yeah,
you don't really see her do it, but he's making noises that sound like noises he can't make.
right. But whatever. I
Yeah.
agree. I thought overall the scene's really effective, and yeah, his eyes for that actor. Um, his name is Matthew Sunderland. The first instance of it is when the mother is burned alive, and he like watches, and he cannot move and do anything. Could you imagine the horror of that?
Oh yeah.
Uh, and they really, his face says it all. And I agree. I think it's a small thing, but it's super effective. And you're left to wonder how disturbing that must be, watching your wife burn alive and struggle, watching your daughter do these things, and you are forced to just sit and watch. You can't even make a sound. But now the audition is upon Pearl, and she goes and arrives at the church where the auditions are taking place. And there's this long line of young women that are waiting and hoping to woo these talent scouts. Um, and Pearl is very, very excited. Mitzi is there as well, but is horribly nervous. And is so nervous, in fact, that she tells Pearl to go before her. And Pearl does that.
Yeah, and Pearl is not nervous because this is her destiny. Of course they're going to choose her because they have to. Because she is a star. Isn't
Yeah.
she?
Yeah, so much for that.
Yeah, well, she does this really nice dance number. It's not really maybe technically very complex or anything, but it is this she begins just dancing, and then these other women dressed as soldiers come out, and a background drops of like a war zone, and it's clearly like an in her head kind of fantasy that she's living. But in this fantasy, she's the star of the show, and she's the head of all this choreography, and it's beautiful. And this is her moment in the limelight, and she's smiling. There's like this one dance motion where she sort of like emphasizes her face and how bright and happy it looks. And the sequence ends, and she's holding this pose, the end of her big number, and the guy says, "Okay, thank you, but it's a no. Please send in the next person." And she's crushed, of course. Destiny has not happened like it should. She killed her family. She killed her lover because she was going to go on the run. She was going on the road. She didn't need them anymore. Her life was going to be different. And all that has suddenly turned into nothing. She did it for nothing. She's not going to be a part of this dance troupe. She's not going to be a star. And she asks why, and they simply say, well, you know, we were looking for someone a little more American, a little more blonde. And to be reduced so quickly and so casually, this is where you get that huge scene where she breaks down and she screams, and she's screaming, "No, I'm a star. You have to let me do it again, I can make it better. And she's having this breakdown. And this, I think, is the start of where Mia Goth, like, really puts in the work. Pulls no punches with her acting.
Yeah. No, it's really disturbing to watch. And in a movie full of disturbing sequences, her breaking down like this in front of these people, I found to be one of the most uncomfortable things. And I don't know if it was because of secondhand embarrassment or what, but like weeping, snot coming out of her nose, and she's just like in such a raw state of being. For me, it was like just as uncomfortable as some of the horror elements, right? And I think that's to Mia Goth's credit. Whenever they say that they're looking for someone a little more blonde, a little more American, you can't help but, as an audience member, at least me, and I'm sure you, if Mitzi's going to get it, because they basically describe her.
Yeah.
And God, the sense of that foreboding, knowing what's to come.
Oh,
and we sure do get it. So it's a really effective build. Just that talent scout saying that to her makes you, the audience member's mind, wander. And at this point, the movie's coming to a close, right? There's only about maybe 30 minutes left. It's a shorter movie, 102 minutes. So you know something's going to happen. And I was frothing at the mouth. I was ready.
Yeah. Okay. These last like 30 minutes of the movie make the movie for me. Ooh,
yeah.
This next scene. Okay, I'll get into it. So Mitzi finds her behind the place crying, and she's consoling her, and she says, okay, well, I'll take you home. You know, it's okay. And they get home, and Pearl is only getting worse. And she's kind of being incoherent. She's talking about things that Mitzi's not clued in on. She's not really making sense. And Mitzi does the harmless thing of, she says, okay, well, you can at least tell Howard how you feel, you know, and if you feel embarrassed or it's hard to tell him what you want to say, then practice on me, and then you can tell him in person. And it feels like this very lighthearted, like, oh, we'll just do an exercise so that way you'll be a little less nervous. You know, she thinks this is just her meek, nervous friend who's sad she didn't get the part she auditioned for, you know. It's very innocent. You know, you really don't think anything could be wrong or nefarious. And this scene, man, she goes into this whole monologue where she describes everything that's happened to her and all the like boiling emotions she's felt during each moment of the movie and why she's done this, and how pretty much everything that's happened and every monstrous thing she's done was like a crime of passion that she felt in the moment. And she's sorry that she hated Howard for leaving him, and she's sorry she killed her father, and she thought it would be better, and you know, it was all gonna work out, and then it didn't, and she is gonna try to make it better, and she's gonna try to do what her mother told her and make the most out of the situation she has, and she's gonna make it right with Howard. If they can only cover everything up together and move on. And so in doing this, she partially purposefully, but partially inadvertently, confesses everything she's done to Mitzi in this one moment, in this very long monologue. Like, it's all one shot, one take of Mia Goth's face, crying and saying it, and it's really impressive acting. And it's scary, and it's emotional, and it's impactful. And at the end of this whole long monologue, it cuts back to Mitzi, who's just sitting there, shell-shocked, and she responds simple. And I don't, you know, what do you respond with to all this? She responds by just saying, okay, well, I think I better get going. My mother's gonna be worried about me. What a great monologue, right?
Yeah, it's a great monologue, and it's not one that most movies could pull off. This is a lengthy monologue.
No, it's
I
not
mean,
one so many actors could pull off.
no, no, I completely agree. I mean, she even admits that she was pregnant with Howard's child and then she miscarried, and that she had this great sense of relief that she didn't want the kid. And um, like you said, I mean, she just reveals all these awful, awful things. Some of them um, transgressions against Mitzi herself, because by extension, um, she of course is on her brother's side in a lot of these situations. But that's what I was thinking the entire monologue. I was like, man, this is ballsy because it's
Oh yeah.
lengthy, really, really lengthy, and she just gives one hell of a performance. I like try not to talk about the Oscars really ever, or like any of those award shows, but it really is a shame that horror is so ignored largely by those award shows, because I do think Mia Goth's performance is one of the better I saw in 2022 as Pearl specifically. I think she's like really, really talented, and I already thought that after X, but this movie more so just really makes me want to see her in other things. And I don't think that actors are. I don't think their worth is measured in awards, but I do think it's a damn
It
shame.
is a shame.
She'll never really get the recognition she deserves for this role.
Yeah, yeah. This movie's so atypical too. Like
Hmm.
that to be stigmatized is really unfair, especially I think in this case. Yeah.
And I have other issues with this movie that I won't even go into because, to be honest, I was probably nitpicking. But I'll tell you, her nothing that Mia Goth does in this movie is an issue for me. I really do think she did a great job.
It is ballsy. I like that you said that, but it's also like this is the crowning jewel of this movie for me. Like it makes it, it sells it. It's what solidifies this movie. I think is such a well regarded movie, and it is like very successful, monetarily and critically. And I think it deserves that. She deserves that. It's hard to center a whole movie around one person, and they pulled it off really well, and she pulled it off. And if you can't complain about Mia Goth, and most of the movie is Mia Goth, then you can't complain about most of the movie. But in this monologue, we do get a little bit more insight into her internal mental state and emotion, and she reveals that she enjoyed killing these people. Not her father, but she felt like these other people kind of hurt her emotionally, at least, and so it felt good to kill them. And she just loves killing in general. That's why she killed that duck at the beginning of the movie. She likes killing the animals. She gets some sense of like sadistic satisfaction out of it. And maybe it is sort of like her repression coming out. All the things she buried in her shadow is coming out in a very uniquely violent way. And this makes her seem more dangerous, I think, than she had the entire movie. And this is maybe why you can understand how she became the serial killer in X that we meet. But then, like you were saying, Mitzi is trying to flee at this point. So you continue with that.
Yeah, Mitzi is trying to leave, and Pearl, just another really great scene. I mean, I think it all. I consider these to be the same scene because they're in the same space, and but there is such a stark. There's a shift in the performance here. Her tactic changes, and we see that. She is no longer venting. Now she is manipulating Mitzi, and she wants her to say it, to say that she got the role over her. And at first, Mitzi is compelled to lie, because I think she understands the fragile state that Pearl is in. But she is ultimately forced to admit it, that she did, in fact, get the audition. And she does leave successfully, but she only gets into the driveway until Pearl is driven so mad by her jealousy that she chases her down the driveway and kills her brutally with, I think, an axe, right?
Yeah. I think it's very interesting that you said she admits she got the part. So you think she got the part because they never explicitly confirm.
Oh, I do think she got the part.
Okay.
Yeah, you think she forced her into saying she got the part?
Well, for at first she says, "Oh, well, I didn't get the part," and then she said, "Yes, you did," and then she insists, "No, I didn't get the part." Yes, you did.
Yeah.
It. I don't know that she got the part. I think it's purposefully ambiguous, and ultimately, it doesn't matter if she got the part or
Yeah,
not.
you're right.
Mitzi has become this projected mannequin of like, this is the person you're not, this is the person who gets the part. It's this blonde all-American girl who has a happier life than you. That's who got the part. And maybe that person, that archetype of a person isn't literally Mitzi, but it might as well be Mitzi. And so in a fit of jealous rage, she's gonna cut her down.
No, that's a great point. The way I took it was that she got it, but that she was lying. Um, but the better point there is that you're right. I don't think it does matter because of what Mitzi represents. And we see that with Pearl later on as a character in X. She has that line, "I hate blondes" in X.
You're right.
And, it all comes back to this movie. I really, really enjoyed that. I love those little Easter eggs that you find in the movie. And it makes it a particularly good prequel, especially considering that this prequel was never even intended to happen, right? They decided during X that they were going to make one and then just started filming it right after they finished X. So the attention to detail here is impressive by any standard, I think, but also when you consider that it was really just a passion project they decided to embark on during another movie. I love what they've done with this character. Mitzi is taken out with an axe. She is then dismembered and also becomes alligator food.
And what a scene. First of all, this
Yeah.
is like
Yeah.
it's completely covered with music, but it's her brutally dismembering this body with an axe, and it's gory, and it's like, this movie hasn't been particularly, I guess it has been visceral, it has been gory, it's been pretty realistic depictions of blatant murder, but this is the scene that like really, to me, churned some stomachs, is the dismemberment. Because she is this like beautiful blonde Southern belle all-American girl, and she's young and pretty, and then an axe comes down and her arm is gone, and then her other arm is gone, and then her head is gone, and the bloody stump that used to be her neck is gushing, and it's brutal. It's so like, wow. Is it? Oh man. And then she's carrying the head and throws it to the alligator, and the alligator chomps on it and squishes it, and you can recognize the face, but it's just soiled. It's this bloody head, this severed head, and she's holding it by these once cute ringlets of hair, and wow. I love this.
Yeah. Yeah, it feels angry and, not to overuse the word, but visceral, and it is pretty uncomfortable. Then we have another really just disturbing scene where just after feeding the gator Mitzi's body parts, Pearl goes into the basement that she should not have and lies with her mother's corpse. And I don't know, something about that just really unsettled me. That image is just in my head, though.
She imagines her mother like comforting her and telling her that she loves her.
Mm-mm.
And it's her escaping into the fantasy again. And now the fantasy has simply become she has a good relationship with her mother. But it is disturbing that she is laying with this charred corpse.
Of her own doing.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, it's really weird. And then we get another shift where Pearl decides that she's going to make the best of what she has, and settles into this home. She settles into this home that she have, and she's going to wait for Howard to return from the Great War, and he does just the next morning. And this is my chief complaint with this film is why does this man not run when he gets to this house? Because when he gets to this house, the one of the last shots in the movie is Pearl in the kitchen, and at the dining room table, you have seated around that same rotten pig, now 2 days older than it was before when it was already full of maggots and rotting in the sunlight. You have Pearl's mother's remains, charred remains, her dead father, and that nasty, rotten pig. And that's what he comes home to. And I think in her mind, she is really kind of making this a comfortable home for him to return to. But why would he have stayed? That's the biggest question that is sticking out in my mind. Why did he stay?
Yeah, well, when she shows up too, she's holding a pitcher of lemonade, which is the first thing we see her do in X. The first interaction she has with a character, where she actually has dialogue, is when she offers lemonade to Maxine. And I think that's a nice parallel. I guess I understand that complaint, especially because she killed his sister. But I don't know. If I learned anything from this movie, I learned that Howard is the best husband in the world for doing all the things he did for this woman.
Yeah.
And she greets him. Well, we don't really see what happens. Like, he comes home and, like, looks horrified. And then we see her say, "Welcome home," with this kind of pained smile. And it at first is like a smile of, like, someone who's happy to see someone. And then the credits roll over this shot. And it's a live shot of her smiling, and tears well up in her eyes and stream down her face, and the smile becomes, like, more and more distorted and pained and warped and just weird and uncomfortably looking. And it goes on for, like, almost the entire duration of the credits. Like, in reality, this shot is like a good, quite a few minutes long, isn't it? And it becomes more and more unsettling. And, like, that's how the movie ends. The credits are rolling. And I think it's a great way to end it.
I do too. I I watched the whole thing. Did you?
Yes.
Yeah, I watched the entirety of the credits to see if how long it would go, and Mia Goth holds that face for a long time. Respect to her for this.
Mad respect.
Yeah, respect to her for this whole movie. I do think it's really well done. Problems with the film aside, little things that I've mentioned here and there, other things that just are not that worth mentioning. This is a showcase. This is an actor's showcase for sure, this movie. And it just makes me excited for Max XX Scene, the next installment in this franchise. And probably the last if they're smart.
Max XX Scene, do you think she's going to become Pearl-esque and become a killer?
I hope so, at least. I mean, I think that could be fun. But who knows? Who knows what the movie will be? This one, you could kind of gather what was going to happen. You would know from watching X that Pearl was probably going to kill somebody in this movie. This next installment, Maxine's follow-up, much more ambiguous. This could go anywhere.
Yeah,
so I'm excited.
Yeah, I am too.
I'm excited. I probably will avoid any trailers or anything for it.
Yeah. It'll probably be like hugely successful too. This movie's budget was only $1 million, which does make sense when you consider that they were reusing the sets and Mia Goth from the last movie, and they kind of had everything there while they were filming another movie. But it, in the box office, made $9.4 million, which isn't crazy for the box office, but this movie was largely released online through streaming services, and that's what I think most people have seen it on, and they've probably made buttloads of money off of that. So
Yeah, I think so.
And then people are receiving this movie very well, like general audiences and critics. So all the reasons
they've been really successful, and I can understand why. There's nothing really like this being made. So shout out to the team behind this. I think A24 was smart to get behind it and distribute it. They distributed Pearl. I think they distributed X.
Yeah, I believe so.
But this is a good horse to hitch your wagon to.
Definitely. Also, shout out to the costuming. That's something I neglected, but I really appreciated it. When she goes to audition, she wears this beautiful red dress.
Yes, she does. You're right.
Yeah, I really loved it. But all that aside, I love this movie, and I've said my piece.
You and Martin Scorsese. I forgot to say this earlier. Martin Scorsese loved this movie.
Well, cheers, Martin. I'm glad.
But could you imagine, like, you make a movie and Martin Scorsese's like, man, that movie's dope.
I'd be pretty happy with myself, yeah.
Yeah, that's really cool. So anyway, yeah, I agree. I liked this movie a lot and really, really, really enjoyed Mia Goth's performance in it. So
yeah, and
thanks for watching it with me.
Thank you for watching it with me, and thank you everybody for listening. Goodbye.